Hi boys and girls, it's Miss Maddesen, and today I have another art project for you. This one is more for my older kids. I usually do projects that you can do really with any age, but I never really do ones that really focus on my older kids. So this one is for you guys. So today we're going to be making one of these beautiful mixed media landscapes. We've got kind of a couple different things going on here. We've got some drawing happening, working on our line work. We've got some watercolor technique happening, and we've got a collage element because we're going to be using a couple different papers here. So let me show you what kind of supplies you're going to need for this project. As always, we're going to need to start with paper first. So you're going to need a piece of white and a piece of black cardstock. It's kind of important for this one that you do have a sturdier paper since we are going to be painting with watercolor on it. So make sure that it's something that can hold up to getting wet and having some paint put on it. So you're also going to need some scissors. You're going to need a pencil, some markers. Really, you only need one. I've got a couple different types here. You can even use a pen as long as it's not going to bleed when you put the watercolor next to it. So you can use whatever you've got just as long as it's not going to bleed through. You're going to need a paintbrush of some kind, something that's probably a little bit finer since we're working smaller today. A glue stick, some salt, believe it or not. Some watercolor palettes, whatever you've got. I got these. I believe I got this one here at Michael's for like $5. And then this one, I actually don't know how much it costs, but you can also get tempera paints or acrylic paints and water them down, and they'll work just fine too. You're going to need some blue painter's tape and just some water for your watercolor. Oh, and a towel for your paintbrush. That way you're not getting your papers too wet. You can dab your paintbrush on this. So I'm using an old rag. Don't take your parents' towels without asking. You can also use paper towels. Okay, let's get started. So first things first, we're going to start on our white paper. Now with this white paper, we're going to cut out whatever shape we want to use. It can be big, it can be small, you can do multiple. Out of one piece of white paper, I've already cut out all of my shapes. And I did a couple different ones just to, as always, show you variety. So I've cut a triangle, I cut a rectangle, and I cut a circle. Now, shapes with straighter edges are going to be easier to use once we get to the next step, and you'll see why. But I'm going to use my circle just so I can show you what to do with it if you want to use a circle, because this one is going to have kind of a little bit more of an extra step to it. But you've already seen the triangle in the first example, and the rectangle is pretty much the same as the triangle. You'll see why. So coming back to our example real quick, you see how we have this nice white border. It's nice and crisp here where our watercolor is, and it makes this nice border around it. So how we achieve that is we actually take the tape and we tape down our edges as evenly as we can. So with the rectangle, you would just tape here, 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 and here, and you would just cover your edge a little bit so that you have that nice border. Now, I'm going to show you on the circle because it's a little bit different on the circle because circles are round, they're not straight. So as you can see, I have already drawn my border on my circle that I'm going to kind of follow, but instead of using, just 4 pieces of tape, because that's how we get a rectangle or a square, or 3 pieces of tape for a triangle, we're going to have to use multiple pieces of tape to work our way around the circle. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're going to use a bunch of smaller pieces of tape for this. So just to get started, and make sure you're working on a surface that it's okay to tape to. If you need to tape it to like a piece of cardboard or something, that's fine. I'm using my art desk here. You can use your floor if it's okay to put tape on your floor. As always, ask your parents what's okay. So I've started. I've got a little sliver of my border down. You can see it through the tape here. Now what I would do next is I would overlap this so that I get as close to the next part of my line as possible. So like this. Now really what you're going to be doing is you're going to be creating a polygon. You can see there's kind of a corner here, but you should be getting close enough all the way around that it kind of doesn't show too much, you know. So here, next one, you just get here, and the more you go around, the rounder this is going to begin to look. All right, so I'm going to get this all taped down, and then we'll move on to the next step. So a quick little side note I forgot to mention about your taping process is that in order to make sure that you're not going to rip up your paper when you take your tape off at the end, a trick that you can do is you can take your tape, put it right on your clothes, your shirt, your pants, wherever, rip it up a couple of times, and what you're doing is you're collecting lint off of your clothes. Now it'll still stick to your paper, but it won't be as sticky, so it won't adhere to your paper as much, and you'll have less of a chance of ripping your paper at the end. See? So I have my whole circle taped down. You can see just how much tape I have used to make this circle. You don't have to go this in depth if you don't want to. This is just how I could get it as close to a circle as I could using straight lines. If you wanted to make like an octagon or a hexagon, something like that, you can also do that, and that'll be less tape, more straight edges, a little bit easier, but still a fun, neat shape. But just so that you can see the difference between the circle and a shape with straight lines, here is the rectangle. So this would be the same for the triangle, like I mentioned before, except it would be 3 pieces of tape instead of 4. And you can see how it's just one straight piece of tape, done. You've got your border and 3 or 4 pieces. So I'm not going to use this one. I'm going to work with my circle since I spent all that time taping it down, and let's move on to the next step. Just a quick side note on the tape again, this is why we get lint on our tape before we rip it up. I ripped this up really fast and I didn't put lint on the tape, and you can see what happened. I would hate to see this happen to your artwork, so learn from my mistake because even art teachers aren't professionals. So make sure you get your tape nice and linty and pick it up slow when you're done. Don't just rip it up like I did. So what comes next is us drawing in our scene. I like to start in pencil, that way if I make any mistakes, I can go back and erase them. But you don't have to think too hard on this. As always, just let your creativity flow, and sometimes we make really happy accidents, and some of the most beautiful things come from just letting our imagination run wild. So I am going to start with my ground, and I'm going to make this, just a couple of snowbanks. Maybe I'll add a few more like this. There. I like that. That looks nice. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pencil in my mountains. Okay. I like that. And then I'm going to add a little crescent moon up here. There. Okay. And now that is something that I'm going to clean up with the eraser. So now the next step is the trees. So think about your foreground, middle ground, background as we always do when we're doing the trees in this next step. So foreground is going to be up here, middle ground might be somewhere in this area, background is going to be back here. And you can use the lines you drew as your snowbanks to kind of guide you. So bigger is going to be in the foreground, smaller is going to be in the background, and medium is going to be in the middle ground. So I'm going to draw a big tree right here, and I'm going to make it kind of take up a lot of space. I want a nice big tree. And I'm just doing pine trees because they're something that you would find with all of their needles still on them in a nice snowy place. Give it little tufts at the top if you want to. Okay, and I'm going to repeat that for my middle ground and background. So I've got all my trees in now. I'm really happy with the way they came out. So what we're going to do next is we're going to add the shadows of the mountains. So how you do these is you're going to start at the peak of one of your mountaintops. And you're just going to decide kind of what direction and shape you want them to be. I like that. I'm going to roll with it. So the next one, you would start here too, right at the top. And you're going to want to go in the same direction as the last ones. All right, I like that. So now I'm also just going to kind of use these as a guideline for some of these littler lines that I'm going to draw. And this is how we're going to create the slope of our mountain here. Now, I also am going to go back in and add a couple little shadows on the mountain like this. They can be whatever shape you want them to be. Nature is not perfect. Okay. Yeah, I like that. So then what we're going to do is we're going to draw the lines to be our shadows, to fill them in, but keep them kind of stylized. So I'm just going to go through like this with these diagonal lines. You can do cross-hatching, make X's, whatever you want to do, but I'm going to do this, and I like this way because it's opposite from the direction that we made the mountain peaks, so it stands out more. So what I am going to do next is I'm going to fill in the rest of these lines here, or these shapes here, with these same lines in the same direction, and you'll see how that looks in just a second. All right, so another thing I forgot to mention about when you're choosing what direction to make your shadows is think about the direction of your light source. So I put my moon up here, so the light would be shining here, which makes sense that my shadows would be on the opposite side because the moonlight would be hitting this part of the mountain first. But that's a little technical detail that you don't really have to worry too much about, but if you want to get fancy, you can. So now the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take the black utensil of your choice. Again, make sure that it's something that's not going to bleed when you put water next to it. Test it on a piece of scrap paper first and see how that goes. And then that can help you decide. And we're just going to go through and outline everything we just did in pencil in this black marker, and then we'll get started on the watercolor. Ta-da! A beautifully outlined winter scene. So now we're going to get started on the watercolor. I'm going to kind of try to make mine look like the Northern Lights, so I'm going to use like purples and blues and greens, but you can use whatever colors you want. This is your picture. So I'm just going to get started here. Use purple first. Now with watercolor, remember that the less water you have, the more pigmented it will be. The more water you have, the more transparent it will be. So I'm just going to be very careful as I kind of start to paint around here, especially paying attention to getting up close to those lines. If you've got too much water on your brush, you can dab it off. Go back into your paint. Now this should be more pigmented. There, yeah. You can see how with less water in the paint, your paint is darker and more opaque, meaning you can't see through it as much, as opposed to being more transparent like what you're seeing right here. All right, so I'm going to fill this all in with all of my colors. If you're switching to different colors, you can, kind of bring it close to like this. You can use just water on your brush to kind of blend things together. Go to town, be creative, be experimental, see what happens. All right, so I've got my watercolor background filled in. I'm really happy with how it came out. Now we're going to play around with the salt. So what you're going to do is with your watercolor still wet, you're just going to sprinkle your salt on there. And as it dries, you're going to get this really cool effect of like stars or snow. It just helps it make like look a little bit more wintry. And if your salt is not sticking, you can always just add like a little bit more water to the area. All right, let's see how that dries. All right, so my watercolor is dry. Now all that's left to do is brush off this extra salt, and you can see where this nice speckly texture has been left behind by the salt drying into the paint. So to me, this looks like the stars in the night sky or falling snow, and I think it's really just the finishing touch on our picture here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start peeling up this tape nice and carefully. That way we can see what our border looks like. Look how nicely that border turned out. So I'm actually going to go back in and I'm going to erase my pencil line here just so that it's nice and clean cut and white, like all the way around the way that my example was. And then we're going to put it onto the black paper. Okay, so I've cleaned up my shape, and now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it down on my black paper, and I'm going to trace a circle using this one here that's just a little bit bigger around, and then I'm going to cut it out, and that is going to be the black border for this paper here. All right, final step. All that's left to do is glue the white picture down to your black border paper, and then we'll have a beautiful finished project. And there we have it, 2 beautifully done winter night scene projects. Some things that you could do with these are you could turn them into bookmarks, you could turn them into holiday cards, send them to your friends and family, give them out as holiday gifts. Whatever you want to do with them, drop the pictures in the comments below, tag the Boys and Girls Club in them. Show us what you do with these, please. I would love to see some of my older kids getting creative with a project that's a little bit more up to your speed. If you liked this project, let me know. If you didn't, it was too hard, let me know. That way I can keep making videos for you guys that are, you know, suited to what you want to be doing. All right, guys, as always, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay creative. Bye.